name's Lee Taylor Mickelson, and I'm on the board with NCECA as the exhibitions director. And I'm extremely honored to be introducing this panel, 50 Years of Women Trailblazers. I think it's such an appropriate topic at our 50th anniversary to look back and talk about the women that have made an impact on our field. So this panel will celebrate 50 years of critical contributions by women trailblazers in their roles of artists, professors, mentors, writers, gallery owners, and museum professionals. And I'm so happy that Beth Ann Gerstein will be the one who's bringing this topic to the forefront. She's the executive director of the American Museum of Ceramic Art in California. She holds an MFA from Cranbrook Academy of Art. She currently serves on the board of Watershed, and from 1994 to 2014, she was the executive director of the Society of Arts and Crafts in Massachusetts. Before I turn the mic over to her, I just want to remind you to please turn off your cell phones so that everyone can concentrate on this topic. And I also want to remind you that the panels and the exhibitions that you see here in NCECA come from all of you. And we have a deadline coming up for panels for next year, 2017, if you could think about the 51st NCECA conference. So put your thinking caps on, because we want to hear from you. And if there's something missing here at this conference, bring it to the next one. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Beth Ann.
Good morning. This conversation for this panel began actually about 22 years ago when I met Gail Brown. The reason I say that is she introduced me to Janice Morris Wunderlich. In reality, this panel came about when Janice saw the theme for this year's NCECA conference, Makers, Mentors, and Milestones. She was immediately flooded with thoughts of the many women who influenced and shaped her, and felt compelled to propose a panel focusing on women's contributions in ceramics. Janice was inspired by her friends Toni Marino, Alex Kraft, Arzi Umali, and Melanie Shaw, who championed the exhibition 50 Women, a celebration of women's contributions to ceramics at the American Jazz Museum. So long story short, Janice contacted me, and together we invited Janet Koplos and Joan Takayama Ogawa to join us in exploring this topic. Our first task was to define what is a trailblazer. The dictionary definition is a person who makes a new track through wild country, a pioneer, an innovator, a groundbreaker, a trendsetter, an explorer, a bushwhacker. In deciding the structure of this panel, we had to set some parameters. Listen carefully. We decided to focus on women trailblazers who were active from 1960 to today. We decided to focus on women from the United States, and we only have 90 minutes today. Each panelist was asked to select just a few women to focus on. This panel will give you a sense of the breadth and depth of the contribution of women to our field. We also understand that everyone in this audience might select a different list. So before I turn it over to the panelists, I would like to quickly present 20 women who were not selected for today's discussion, but certainly could have been. I'm sure I've missed many worthy artists, and I apologize in advance. This list is organized by their date of birth, so let me begin. It only seems fitting that I should start with Beatrice Wood. We could do an entire lecture on her life as an actress, painter, ceramicist, and writer. She masterfully included a wide range of influences in her artwork, from Dadaism, modernism, Eastern philosophy, folk art, and ethnic jewelry. She didn't start working with clay until she was almost 40 years old and became known for her luster glaze work. While she didn't invent the glaze, she did create an extraordinary range of luster colors. She lived a bohemian lifestyle, had famous lovers, and attributed her longevity to chocolate and young men. Eva Zeisel was born in Budapest and eventually moved to the United States. She was hired to create the Department of Ceramic Arts and Industrial Design at Pratt Institute in New York City. In addition to her teaching, she designed dinnerware, glassware, metalwork, ceramics, and furniture. Most of Zeisel's designs are designed in groups and nest together, creating modular forms that also function to save space. Her forms were often abstractions of the natural world and reference the human body, and are timeless. Early in her career, Edith Heath was approached by a buyer from the famous West Coast department store Gump's to make work for them in their in-house pottery studio. She continued to work in her own studio and in 1947 founded Heath Ceramics. Her motto was to create simple good things for good people. Her pieces were designed to fire at lower than normal temperatures, thus saving energy while producing a durable and non-porous product. Her designs are still being produced today. Toshiko Takiezu developed her signature closed forms. These moon forms reference the figure and also served as a three-dimensional canvas for her intense colors and kinetic brushstrokes. She frequently added beads of clay so the pieces would rattle when moved and wrote secrets in the interior walls. She thought that the most important part of the piece is the black airspace inside that you can't see and represents what's inside of a person. Karen Carnes is known for her functional and sculptural stonework. When she was in her mid-20s, she and her husband David moved to North Carolina to teach in the avant-garde Black Mountain College. At the closing of Black Mountain in the early 50s, she and other BMC artists moved to Stony Point near New York City and started the Gate Hill Cooperative. The co-op was a living experiment in integrating art, life, family, and community. She moved to Vermont in 1978 and has lived and worked there since. Helen Drutt began collecting craft in the 1950s and helped found the Philadelphia Council of Professional Craftsmen in 1967. In 1973, she became the first person to teach the history of modern craft on the college level and founded a gallery in her name. In 2014, she donated a collection of 74 works, including ceramics, furniture, and jewelry, to the Hermitage Museum in Russia. The gift coincided with the institution's 250th anniversary. Her intent is to help foster the relationship between Russia and the U.S. Viola Fry lived and worked in San Francisco Bay Area and was known for her monumental, brightly colored ceramic sculptures, which explore issues of gender, cultural iconography, and art history. Fry was one of the number of California artists working in clay in the 50s and 60s who pushed the boundaries and scale of clay to produce works with robust sculptural qualities associated with abstract expressionist painting, pop art, and what would become known as California funk. Janet Mansfield was the Australian potter, author, editor, gallerist, and publisher. She launched Ceramics Art and Perception in 1990, Ceramics Technical in 1995. She started her own publishing company, Mansfield Press, wrote a number of books on ceramics. She was a member of the International Academy of Ceramics for over 30 years and served as their president for 5 years. Paula Winokur works with porcelain in unexpected and challenging ways. She said that porcelain is a material usually thought of as delicate, fragile, and transparent. Porcelain is considered the primary clay from which all other clays are derived. It comes from the earth as pure, white, strong, and durable. She chose to work with porcelain because it allows her to examine the landscape and issues surrounding climate change without necessarily making literal interpretations. Patty Warashina was an art student at University of Washington in the 1960s. She describes it as a pretty macho environment where women were generally not included in technical issues relating to the kiln. She began creating a series of figurative works that used humor to skewer this gender imbalance in the field. She also explores the human condition, feminism, car culture, political and social topics, and insider art issues. Her influences include surrealism, the funk movement, and the Chicago Harry Who. Danish artist Nina Hull, who recently passed away, links the American and Danish ceramic tradition. Her work balances an expressive style encouraged by her time in the United States as an art student, along with her Danish ceramic tradition firmly based on form and function. Some of her most well-known work is her fire sculptures, which have an element of risk, provide an experience of awe, break some rules, and include a communal experience. Beth Lowe was born in 1949 to parents who had recently immigrated from China. In her own words, "My work in ceramics and mixed media collage revolves primarily around issues of family and my Asian American background. Cultural marginality and blending, tradition and westernization, language and translation are key elements in my work." Anne Krauss is best known for her painterly narrative scenes on traditional ceramic forms. She was inspired by the European porcelains that she first saw at the Metropolitan Museum. Many of her narratives were drawn from dream diaries that she kept. Her narratives also present her views on political, social, and cultural issues. Annabeth Rosen's work also often includes explosions of rich, thick patterning and is assembled with many small organic objects to create a much larger, more energetic and dynamic composition. Her forms have been described as bulbous, tubular, squirmy, unidentifiable life forms. The pieces have energy and even personalities, vaguely familiar, yet too complex to fully comprehend. Christina Bothwell, inspiration for her work comes from her dreams, nature, literature, and interesting things her children says and does. She said that when her children were first born, she was overcome with emotion for them, from the experience of carrying a child and giving birth. She noted that being pregnant is the only time a person has more than one heart in their body. She is also fascinated by what lies below the surface, the unseen. In addition to clay, she includes glass in her sculptures, since the material offers an inner space and transmits light. Kristen Morgan's home is in Southern California, where she is surrounded by Walt Disney, mid-century design, Hollywood, the Kardashians, the hotel where Janis Joplin overdosed, Compton, the beach, the Goodyear blimp, and it's 70 degrees and sunny most days. She said that the objects that she makes are a quiet homage to a reflection of her endearment and disgust of this wonderful, horrible place. Her work looks like something you've discovered in a forgotten building. It's nostalgic, it revives or repairs or repurposes past icons, adding to their history. Her work is literally painted dirt. It's constructed of unfired clay and a little bit of wood. It's both fragile and precarious. J.J. McCracken creates messy situations where performers grovel for access to resources. They are martyrs, misanthropes, thieves, ghosts, and wronged. These characters interrogate the corporate landscape while examining the artist's own patterns of consumption. Reoccurring themes include malnutrition, water rights, free speech, and shouldering the weight of passing time. Featured here is Thirst and Martyr Performance, a polar struggle between two characters tethered together and unwilling to compromise. C.J. Gillick grew up in the Midwest and found that she had a few great loves: ceramics, travel, and the natural world. She's an amazing artist and has been a teacher, arts administrator, and arts therapist. Her studio is lined with photographs and images of exotic flowers. Through her work, she questions ideas of beauty, attraction, eroticism, and desire. Garrett Grimm's sculptures are based on her many years of working as a production potter. She reinterprets the folk figurine tradition with a very unique and distinctive approach of using dozens of thrown vessels. Christina Cortova does not want to be labeled as a Puerto Rican artist or a woman artist or any type of artist other than a compelling artist. She does believe authenticity can come only from a deeply personal place. Her Afro-Caribbean heritage and her understanding of contemporary and historical influences have impacted her art form. And finally, Courtney Madison is an artist and ocean advocate working to inspire policymakers and the public to conserve our changing seas. She primarily hand sculpts intricately detailed ceramic sculpture works inspired by the fragile beauty of coral reefs and the human-caused threats they faced. Courtney's large-scale ceramic coral reef installations for her ongoing series, Our Changing Seas, have been exhibited around the country in an effort to promote awareness for the protection of our blue planet. There is no way to sum up this selection of artists, but each of them has made an impact on our community in a significant way through their teaching, writing, exhibiting, and especially their artwork. And now I'd like to introduce you to our panel. Janet Koplos is the co-author of Makers, A History of American Studio Craft, published and authored the contemporary Japanese sculpture, is currently researching a history on the New Art Examiner, a controversial magazine published in Chicago from 1973 to 2002. She was the editor of Art in America magazine for 18 years. She's published approximately 2,500 freelance articles, reviews, and essays in some 24 periodicals over the last 40 years. She received a Critics Fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts early in her career, an Art Writers Grant from Creative Capital and the Andy Warhol Foundation in 2015. Our second panelist is Joan Takayama Ogawa. She received her BFA at UCLA, an MA at Stanford University, and ceramics education at Otis College of Art and Design in Los Angeles. Her ceramics are in the permanent collection of museums across the country. She is professor of ceramics and product design at Otis College of Art and Design. In 2010, she was appointed Otis Ceramic Coordinator with the charge of bringing clay back to Otis with a focus on 3D printing and clay. And finally, Janice Mars Wunderlich was born in Akron, Ohio, and has a BFA from Brigham Young University and an MFA from Ohio State University. Currently teaching ceramics at Ohio State University and Ashland University, Janice has led numerous workshops and visiting artist presentations throughout the United States and Canada. Her sculptures have been included in exhibitions and collections throughout the world, and in the documentary film, Who Does She Think She Is? Janice is a prolific studio artist, mother, community activist, and a Boston qualifying marathon runner. And now I'd like to bring Janet Koplos to the podium.
Just want to be careful about one distinction that maybe you made or maybe you didn't. I was not the editor of Art in America. I was an editor at Art in America, never the boss. So don't want to claim too much here. Okay, if you're given the task of choosing 3 women who played an important role in American ceramics, there are hundreds of possibilities. The approach that I've chosen may be counterintuitive. Okay. I'm going to consider the art relationship between some landmark female artists and their artist husbands. This is not so outrageous an approach as it might seem, because negotiating the role of wife has been a treacherous path for creative women. Even today, probably many of us know women who have opted not to marry because they didn't want their work to take second place to their husband's career, or if they did marry, they opted not to have children out of fear that that entire burden would fall upon them. This is a concern in every marital relationship probably, but when both partners are also artists, there are other treacherous competitive aspects as well. Lisa McVey, and this account is taken pretty much from Maker's A History of American Studio Craft. Lisa McVey was almost lost to history and was saved primarily by the Martin Eidelberg's slender 202 book on her work and life. Her story illustrates how arbitrary circumstances and social conditions shape the history of art as much as talent does. McVey was a pioneer of non-symmetrical ceramics in the immediate post-war period. She may have picked up on the biomorphic forms of surrealism, which found its way into American design in the early 1940s. Or she may, as she said, simply have been bored with the regularity of thrown vessels and the propriety of ceramic forms in the 1930s and 40s, no matter how adventurous the glazed surfaces were. McVey graduated from the Cleveland School of Art in crafts, but also studied sculpture. She met Bill McVey, a sculptor who had returned to Cleveland after 2 years in Paris. They married in 1932 and moved to a farm outside Cleveland while he taught and began to make a name for himself. During the Depression and wartime years, the McVeys moved repeatedly for his teaching and military service. In 1947, he was offered a 1-year contract at Cranbrook, and that turned into a longer stay, and Lisa's life changed. She had previously done a little teaching. She had created a multiple, an ashtray that was sold by Neiman Marcus. She had repeatedly struggled to establish suitable studio and kiln arrangements. At Cranbrook, she and her husband lived in faculty housing in an art-focused community, and she had access to the ceramic studios, where her work was encouraged by Maya Grotel. Under these favorable conditions, she experimented. Her early works there show some influence from Grotel and some of the linear decorations that were popular in ceramics at the time, as well as oriental glazes adapted from Bernard Leach's Potter's Book. She was attracted to celadons, and she collected ashes from various Cranbrook fireplaces for glazes. After a few asymmetric press-molded dishes, she created a stoppered vessel that she called a pottle. The tall manipulated form rises from irregular curvature to a narrow and off-centered neck. From this breakthrough, she began to build her forms with slabs, coils, and pinching, turning her back on the increasing popularity of wheel throwing at the time. McVey's work grew larger to 2 or 3 feet. Their vertical movement reached a terminal blossom in curious stoppers, some of them like miniature Noguchi or Henry Moore sculptures. The stoppers, more than any other single feature, defined the personality of her vessels. She titled the works Ceramic Form, which indicates an emphasis on abstraction. All this was exceptional because remember that when she was doing this, Peter Volkos was still making neat, careful, beautifully thrown, wax-resist decorated forms, and she was staking out new ground. The stoppers sometimes led the vessels toward the suggestion of anthropomorphism, zoomorphism is what I'm trying to say, a suggestion that was amplified by the addition of feet in the 1950s. She held to the palette of Leach's glazes, which seemed drab to people then, and when her choices were challenged, she retorted that too many ceramists used bright colors to disguise dull forms. Her work was featured in Ceramics Monthly during its first year of publication, 1953, and also in the Walker Art Center's Everyday Art Quarterly, also in 1953. The dynamic of this artist couple, Bill and Lisa, may have been strained, however. After Lisa's success with the Neiman Marcus ashtray, Bill began to make ceramic ashtrays in boxes. After she began to submit entries to Ceramic Nationals and the juried Decorative Arts and Ceramics exhibition sponsored by the Wichita Art Association, so did he. And his work, more in tune with the times, received more awards. The complicated role of a wife and helpmate with talent may have led her to avoid other instances of potential competition, such as further teaching. At Cranbrook, Maya Gertel's urging, she had taught one summer session, but she declined to teach anymore. The novelty of Ceramics Monthly's attention to her work was not to be hers alone, because the article features a photograph in which Bill appears with her in his artist's smock as if he's just come in from the studio. The Cranbrook benefit to her work ended when Bill was hired to teach in the sculpture department at the Cleveland Institute of Arts, which was a triumphal return to his alma mater. There, Lisa's work was appreciated as daringly new. In 1965, the Institute presented a major retrospective of 75 of her large works, set into a strikingly architectural installation of diagonal walls that was devised by the jeweler John Paul Miller, who also taught there. Around this time, she began making a new body of work, which I'm not going to illustrate, that was connected with the pop art of painting style at that time. Bill McVeigh was a respected and successful sculptor of public works as well as modest pieces. But Lisa's work, it seems to me, is the far more inventive and predictive of the future. Betty Woodman. In contrast to Lisa McVeigh's very limited fame, Betty Woodman is widely celebrated, having even been honored with a retrospective exhibition at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which was held in the contemporary galleries, not in the decorative arts galleries. She shows with Salon 94, a prestigious New York gallery, and at the moment, the Institute of Contemporary Arts in London is presenting her work in an exhibition titled The Theatre of the Domestic, which runs through April 10th, if anyone is heading for London. The ICA's press describes her as one of the most important contemporary artists working in ceramics today. She has been married since 1953 to George Woodman, who was first a painter and now works mostly in photography, although they met when he took a pottery class from her in 1950. They've been married 63 years, if you were trying to work out that math, a lifetime. Their careers are interesting to compare. George taught painting and aesthetics and headed a college art department. Betty started out teaching in pottery in a community center. She was using earthenware in the days when macho stoneware was the prestigious medium. And as a wife, mother, and just a woman in general, she was not taken seriously at that time. She remembers praise from Paul Soldner as the first confirmation of her work from a leading ceramic artist. And I should add that she did also work in stoneware. She started out making standard functional ware, even dinner sets. In the mid-1960s, George began to decorate the forms that she had thrown. And this collaboration continued for nearly a decade, but in 1972-73, he lost interest. She briefly produced undecorated work, but then began to use Tang Dynasty colors with sponge decoration. A visit to the Islamic galleries at the Metropolitan Museum inspired Hu to extend her palette. Equally striking was the gradual loosening of her forms. She began to create elaborate and large vessels for very specific functions: a letter holder, a napkin holder, a dish for asparagus, a dish for mussels. And at the same time, her forms became more fluid and free. But what's interesting for my purposes is the decoration. As a painter, George, let's see, did I lose my track here? George could handle that task, although they were not using much color at the time that he was decorating her work. When he didn't want to do it anymore, she left the pots undecorated for a time until she could figure out what to do. If you only know her work from recent years and you think of strong colors and free brushwork when you hear her name, it's pretty incredible to think of someone else decorating her pots or of the pieces just being white. As you know, she subsequently went in many directions, and I'll mention just a few of them quickly. She found her way into surface treatments that seemed to flatten three-dimensional objects that are in front of the wall, while the pieces on the wall seem to bounce forward. Or she made pieces that jump across the gap between sets of objects. Diana on the left here is also an example of her treating the two primary faces of the pots completely differently, and also of calling attention to the shape of the space between the parts. She also turned shadows into relief structures, as you see on the right here. At times, she operated at very large scale. Her most recent body of work plays with perspective. Many of these are painterly concerns, and it's easy to imagine that Betty was stimulated over the decades of her partnership with George by his painterly concerns, although their brushwork has been quite different. George is now making layered juxtapositions of photographic imagery, often involving reflections. And in recent work, he is painting into photographic montages. He has, incidentally, also done a little work in clay, including this public tile installation. When you consider the tessellation in his painting, which he gave as a title to this one piece here, it's easy to see how he could adapt his painting approach to tile. They suit his preference for two dimensions, but for the most part, he has not chosen to pursue her medium. Kathy Butterly. Kathy Butterly, a master of small-scale, elaborate, and often humorous sculptural objects, is married to the painter Tom Burkhart. In the case of this pair, I have no personal knowledge of their working habits or exchanges of information, but simply as an observer and admirer of the work of both, I've often been struck by the close visual relationship. It's almost as if each has realized the same aesthetic in their own preferred medium. And it would be very hard to say which of them is more successful at present. She has received the Anonymous Was a Woman Award and has been included in the Whitney Biennial. One of his shows was honored as Best Show by the American section of the International Association of Art Critics. Even more surprising, maybe, is that both of them are represented by the same 57th Street Gallery in New York, Tibor Donage. Butterly's work has surely been part of the leading edge of what some people have called the feminization of ceramics. If you think of her coming out of UC Davis and the funk humor of her teacher, Robert Arneson, her own humor is playful, light, and warmly sensual. She shifts the self-mockery, vulgarity, and aggression that made Arneson's work funny into a different register of humor. She was daring enough to be girlish. It would seem that she developed her aesthetic by herself in response to what surrounded her. You see her distinctive tone in one of my favorite pieces on the left here, Mon Smooch, which refers to ceramic history in that Chinese-style base and to art history in its adaptation of Brancusi's The Kiss. And with that title, she makes a joke on the pretensions of sophistication by starting with French and shifting to American vernacular, which kind of pulls the rug out from under your expectations. She also mocks self-important seriousness by making it look as if the sculpture is attached to its base with an elastic band. But look at her work side by side with her husband's, and you can see that they share a certain tone, a manner of organization, an interest in movement and surprise, to say nothing of a palette. There are pockets, enclosures, and layered divisions of color in both. In the second pairing, there's the same kind of irregular linear extensions. The big differences are scale and dimensions because he resolutely works in 2 dimensions, except that he has, on occasion, created an environment, but that was atypical. In the third example, it's again rich color, containment, and outlining that they share. Burkhart's work is striking for its engaging palette and its good humor, although certainly not for being girlish. There are other couples who have generated the same look in different materials. I think of the fiber artist Diane Itter and her husband William, a painter. There are probably many other examples simply because of the exposure and exchange when each partner constantly sees the work of the other. You hope that it's a situation not of stealing, but of sharing and expanding visual possibilities. The greater opportunities for women and the improved, but still not perfect, equality in the galleries and museums has allowed Woodman and Butterly chances that McVey barely experienced, even though all 3 of these artists have blazed their own trails and have served as examples to all who have come after them.
For the past 50 years, Los Angeles witnessed the coming together of women artists, educators, writers, museum professionals, and mentors. 3 Angelinos, the late Susan Peterson, Elaine Levin, and Joe Loria, began with studio practices and branched out to curate, write, and record ceramic history. Their significant contributions ignited fire and excitement into an unprecedented understanding of ceramics, making them our American sheroes. In 1952, our first Los Angeles shero, the late Susan Peterson, founded Chenart Art Institute Ceramics Department, now known as Cal Arts. From 1955 to 1972, she headed the University of Southern California Ceramics Department, where she mentored Ken Price and John Mason. She concluded her educational career at Hunter College in New York. In the late 1960s, Peterson reached an audience beyond university art students with her half-hour Sunday morning television program, Wheels, Kilns, and Clay, which aired on KNXT and KCET. Perhaps she is best known for her book, The Craft and Art of Clay, a textbook which includes step-by-step illustrations of ceramic techniques. Contemporary Ceramics is a survey of 260 contemporary artists, including biographies, photos, and statements. Working with Clay is a step-by-step manual on how to make, which will become a precursor to what we now call the Maker's Movement. In Smashing Glazes, Peterson energetically focuses on 53 artists who share their signature glazes and secrets. Peterson first met Shoji Hamada in 1952 when he toured the US with Bernard Leitch. Peterson introduced many Americans to the Japanese national treasure designation, and when she observes Hamada, she might have been talking about her own quest. His commitment was made when he was 27, is not finished, and he has much to do and too little time. Final goals are never reached. She nostalgically looks back on her own legacy in promoting Native American ceramics. Susan Peterson once described observing life on San Ildefonso Pueblo as an outsider in the living traditions of Maria Martinez. Maria Martinez's exquisite black vessels. Peterson continues her outsider position, recording life in Acoma, Pueblo. Lucy Lewis's collage of her environment and making pots. Lucy Lewis's signature fine line drawing on white and black. And here we have a group of Lucy Lewis and her signature. Art in Clay is a catalog produced during the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics. Betty Scheinbaum enlisted Susan Peterson, who eloquently wrote, "There was a time in Southern California about 30 years ago when vendor stands were in the shape of concrete oranges, hot dogs, derby hats, and hamburgers. The landscape could not be duplicated elsewhere, with its palm trees, blue sky, white plastered bungalows, perpetual sunshine, bumper-to-bumper traffic, Hollywood symbols, and pedestrians in unconventional costume. A synergy of efforts took place in Studio Clay. Additional books included biographies on June Kaneko and 5 decades of Jerry Rothman." Our second Los Angeles shiro is Elaine Levin. Until 1993, Elaine Levin taught at Otis College of Art and Design, Cal State University at Northridge, and Cal State. In 2003, NCECA made her an honorary member in recognition for outstanding accomplishments and notable contributions in the ceramic arts. Here, Elaine Levin is speaking at the American Museum of Ceramic Art. The Common Ground Show became one of the premier exhibitions of the Getty-initiated Pacific Standard Time. Elaine Levin is the author of 133 articles and curator of over 20 exhibitions. Elaine Levin's major contribution is the history of American ceramics, from pipkins and bean pots to contemporary form, which traces the panoramic history of American ceramics. Garth Clark's History of American Ceramics was published the same year. Both books became remarkable ceramic resources. As a professor, Levin made sure her students met female role models during her slide presentations. The following women artists are just a sampling. Levin's primary research introduced us to Adelaide Robineau, who in 1910 studied at Alfred University. Scarab vase took 1,000 hours to carve, winning in 1911 the grand prize at the International Exhibition of Decorative Arts in Turin, Italy. And who can ever forget Gertrude Natzler's Sublime Form and Otto Natzler's glazes. Levin's research recognized husband and wife teams, the Shires and the Hanos, who ran successful potteries. A graduate of UCLA and Columbia University, Shiro Laura Andresen headed the UCLA ceramics program for over 30 years, retiring in 1970. Levin credits Andresen with designing the potter's wheel and developing glaze technology. Andresen taught thousands of students, and Los Angeles became the largest ceramic community in America. A Canadian who held a master's degree in chemistry, Marilyn Levine, arrived at UC Berkeley in the late 1960s to lead superrealism of the common object. And imagine studying in Levin's class Elsa Rady's color field and egg-thin vessels, and having Elsa stop by the Otis Clay studio. Rosalind Delisle's vessels are still but moving. Delisle taught Otis wheel throwing, or should I say trimming. Levin calls out LA Latina artist Dora Delorias, who worked in a white male-dominated world of architectural ceramics and public art. Delorias is an American shiro, growing up in Spanish-speaking household, living in segregated, at the time, residential Los Angeles. Born in Hamburg, Germany in 1936, Ruth Duckworth was not permitted to enter art school in Germany because she was a Jew. After World War II, she filed a claim against the German government, resulting in the purchase of her first kiln. Tragically, her brother escaped Europe and was killed when a Japanese submarine sunk his ship in the South Pacific. Like many Jewish Americans, Clay Shiro, Ruth Duckworth, carried the burden of war and genocide while perhaps finding solace with her hands in clay. Levin writes about the emotional figurative sculpture of Judy Monelis, Beverly Mayeri, and Mary Frank. Early works of Dorothy Hafner, Nancy Sylvan, and Karen Koblitz. Levin encouraged many young women artists by including them in her book. And during a recent telephone conversation with Elaine Levin, she created this list of Shiros who opened significant galleries. At first, women could not take out bank loans in order to establish their galleries, so the first women gallery owners had resources and social acquaintances who they could develop and encourage as patrons and collectors. Growing up in Chicago, where Levin was awarded a high school scholarship, Art Institute of Chicago, one can only imagine how her early art education would guide her towards art history, and fortunately for us, clay. Our third Los Angeles Shiro, Jo Loria, is an independent curator and art and design historian. Excuse me. She made her curatorial debut in 1995 with Exploring a Movement, Feminist Visions in Clay at 5 Los Angeles venues. Formerly decorative arts curator at Los Angeles County Art Museum of Art, Loria extensively published over 100 articles, 8 books, curated over 40 exhibitions in modern, contemporary arts, crafts, and design, and directed documentary films. This Becerra catalog is available at NCECA at the Art and Perception Desk or on Amazon. She created a companion exhibition and book with PBS's Craft in America with executive director Carol Sauvignon. Here you see Jo Loria broadening her reach by including adjacent craft fields with clay. Loria continues to stretch the boundary of clay's appeal by including the finest crafts with clay. Loria curated the Golden State of Craft at Los Angeles Craft and Folk Art Museum in partnership with Craft in America and the Getty-initiated Pacific Standard Time, where over 100 exhibitions opened throughout Los Angeles. This Getty-initiated Pacific Standard Time exhibition was packed with visitors, partly because of the Getty's marketing reach, but also Loria's gift for curating exhibitions which draw record-breaking numbers of visitors. California Design is a book dedicated to a window of time when California was marketed as a design center with explosive population and economic growth. California would become known for outdoorsy, eccentric, and sometimes a funky persona. From 1950s to the 1970s, exhibitions were held at the Pasadena Art Museum. Jack Rogers Hopkins' sweeping form and curved wood grain is in keeping with the dynamic ripples and curves in the sand dune setting. Fine handmade work elevates all disciplines, including clay. Pamela Weir is one of the few Los Angeles women makers. By broadening the acceptance of design, clay also receives more attention. Here, Phyllis Green uses one part clay in her sculpture, video, and installation art at Otis Benmalt's gallery. Based in Santa Monica, California, Green is a groundbreaking artist and Los Angeles Shiro. Loria's dedication to recording Ruth Duckworth's biography and curating her retrospective is a major contribution to the history of ceramics. This installation shot shows how Duckworth could be seen in a home or grand setting. Ralph Becerra's recent retrospective at the Otis Benmalt's gallery was a remarkable achievement. Becerra passed away in 2008, and he never realized a retrospective during his lifetime, even though many attempts were made at various venues. Loria achieved nothing short of a miracle, producing a beautiful Becerra catalog, which you can find at NCECA. Architect Michael Patrick Porter's visual display, including a back panel of orange and custom pedestals adopted from the Frank Lloyd Gallery, made this show, in the words of Otis president Bruce Ferguson, spectacular. Becerra's theatrical use of color, pattern, and scale were clearly understood by Loria, who was a student of Ralph Becerra. This exhibition drew over 3,700 visitors, according to the gallery clicker, which broke down oftentimes because so many people entered at the same time. Loria curated and directed the exterior of the A+D Museum, which at the time was located on Wilshire Boulevard across the street from LACMA, for a recent Peter Shire exhibition. The brilliant use of black and white stripes, which are a signature Shire motif, along with blocks of orange and yellow walls and angled tables, demonstrates Loria's creativity as a curator and Peter Shire's sensibility as a Memphis designer. The American Museum of Ceramic Art's 10-year anniversary exhibition, Honoring the Past and Embracing the Future, is a title that resonates and rings true in today's political climate. This room divider of cups includes a Picasso. So what do all these three Sheros have in common? High intellect, energy, and passion, to name a few. They all come from artistic families and raise children who now lead successful adult lives. These three Sheros, the late Susan Peterson, Elaine Leven, and Joe Loria, are role models for everyone, Sheros and heroes alike. Now I am relieved and pleased to pass the ceramic baton to Janice Wunderlich.
So today, my part of the panel is that I get the pleasure of introducing to you or suggesting the future generation, the under 50 crowd, which I, by the way, barely qualify for. But I had the challenge of researching new artists and new trends, new things happening, and there were so many that I wanted to include, so many vibrant, awesome artists, and because of time, I chose to show artists that were working in innovative ways and in significant movements that represent kind of a group of artists. So bear with me as I work through some themes of contemporary artists in our field today. For those of you who have visited the Fab Lab area of NCECA this year, you will have probably heard about 3D printing, and it's been happening for some time. But my first artist that I wanted to talk about today is Jessica Brandel. She represents emergent technology and the use of emergent technology in ceramics today. One thing that I am noticing among today's contemporary artists is that they are very nimble and able to use technology and social media and to move nimbly between any platform that's available. Someone was just telling me yesterday about a new platform available online, and to me, when I hear about that, I get a little bit nervous inside and think, oh, there's something else I have to deal with now, something else I have to learn. But I'm noticing that artists of today, the contemporary young people, are actually really excited about new platforms and will immediately embrace and jump in to learn these and to figure out how they can use them as tools to work in a new or expand their community. And so I'm noticing this sort of leap in ability to grasp any sort of new technology. I'm also noticing that many of them, like the artists that we've studied so far, have collaborative partners, life partners and working partners, and finding that this structure, the support system, is incredibly important. I'm also noticing that many are able to jump from medium to medium, all different materials, very easily move from painting to photography to drawing to ceramics to new technology like three-dimensional printing, and being able to combine all these in really wonderful ways. Also, the other thing that I noticed, a strong trend to building community and using these tools, technology, to build this wonderful, generate a huge clay community. And there's a huge amount of generosity and free sharing among that community. Okay, so going back to my first artist, Jessica Brandel, who is representing the emergent technology. She works with her partner, Brian Sebas, who you've probably seen in the Fab Lab. And I know it's been very popular because I barely found a seat there yesterday. She's a native Midwesterner, and she draws inspiration from Carrie Esser, Kathy King, Catherine Footer, and she's recently worked at Creta in Rome and at Harvard Ceramics. The very cool thing about this is a picture of her with a robotic 3D printing. She is doing this really fantastic thing where she's using open source technology, stuff that's available online, files that are available online, to be able to create or recreate objects from the past, historical pieces. And in some sort of way, you could look at it in a way as bending time or almost time traveling, because she's able to recreate these objects that are millions of years old in some cases. This is an example of a piece that is unearthed from Pompeii, and in this case, because of Mount Vesuvius erupting in 79 AD, the potter was unable to finish this piece, and so using 3D technology, she can take shards or vessels like this and recreate them and, in a way, finish what was started in 79 AD. In this, she says that she's able to disregard linear time by doing this and be able to connect the past and the future. She's done a lot of work recreating shards, and a lot of times she doesn't even need museum consent. She can just use online files that are available to everyone. And one thing that really impressed me was this really generous online sharing. There's also an online system or online printing where you can, I think it's Jonathan Keep, who has a three-dimensional printer that you can make yourself for under $500. And there's all of these resources that are available, just building a very generous community of sharing. In her contemporary work, she takes these pieces and then reinvents them. And in her words, she holds history or her own ancestry in her hand. Her recent work, this is let's see if I can find it here, a virtual artifact of the Turkana boy, which is a 1.5 million year old hominin African fossil, and she's able to recreate it and reinvent it with glazes using this emergent technology. And in a way, she explains it's like holding her ancestors in her hand or bringing them back to life in a way. And it's her goal to be able to connect to a global culture and to hopefully share these resource files and make as many as possible to share. So I love this idea of generosity, of connecting global culture, and I love the idea of making technology accessible online. My next artist is Ayumi Hori, and I put her in to represent a very generous and nimble community of artists who are able to use social media to do amazing things, as well as making amazing ceramic work and being able to cross over between the two so quickly and beautifully. This is Ayumi with her project that she did in Portland, Maine, which was a brick project accessible to everyone, taking wishes for the future and putting them into they're actually on local streets, and so it's anti-monumental art for the people. Very humble, but very significant. A lot of her work, she explains, is given as gifts, and she just immediately, in talking to her, I noticed a sense of generosity. And it's not just the making of pots, but what happens once they're given or once they're sold. She keeps track of who buys them and where they go in the world, and it's all important to her in building this large community. Being a potter is interesting to her because of the intimacy between the piece of pottery and the people who use it. She has a very user-friendly website. I can't get my students off of her website. They're constantly on it because she's got videos about how to do wonderful things in clay, and they're simple. And when I asked her why she did these videos, she said that it's because she wants to help people. She wants people to be their best. She wants to share. It's her way of being a virtual teacher, and it's easy for her to be able to do that, and she very generously wants to share and have other people be their best. It is through the spirit of generosity and through the generosity of the greater grassroots ceramics culture that she has been able to do some amazing things with the ceramic community that she has built. In 2011, just after the Japanese tsunami and earthquake, within a couple of days, she co-founded Handmade for Japan, which was just made a couple of days after the tsunami, but within 5 days was picked up by the New York Times, and in 2 weeks, actually about a month's span, she raised over $100,000 for the tsunami relief, with the help of a very generous ceramics community, which came together. It just so happened that she was very nimble in social media, and the platform was already there, her knowledge was already in place, so she very quickly was able to create this fundraiser. Again, she created a fundraiser in 2014 for ceramic artist Krista Assad after Krista experienced a house fire and broke her back and had tremendous medical expenses, and they were able to raise over $53,000 in a very short amount of time for this fantastic cause. Because the structure was already in place, and she was very familiar and able and very nimble with social technology or internet technology, she was able to do this quickly. She also does a lot of political fundraising, and this going back to talking about having the structure in place already, in 2008 she was able to raise over $10,000, again with generous contributions from the ceramics community for Obama, and she's planning to do this again for upcoming elections, so keep posted on that. She also runs an Instagram site which has a huge following of over 50,000 people, where she posts multiple times a day, and she started out doing this to track where her pots went throughout the world, and quickly it expanded into a huge sharing of pottery throughout the world. And she considers this to be like a curated feed. It's like art for the people, and anyone can be on this. I love what she says about this. She says, "We live in a world where legitimacy doesn't need to come from being published in print. We can disseminate ideas online and gain value through a meritocracy where good work gains recognition. In many ways, it feels more fair." And she talks about allowing the work to speak for itself. It's just simply the work, and it's out there, and it's available to all, and all can contribute. I love this idea, the spirit of generosity, and this idea that anybody has access to it, and that anybody that wants to be a part of it can join that community. To me, that's very innovative thinking. I also want to, in the spirit of generosity, in the spirit of sharing, there's a lot of new initiatives using social media, but also moving craft beyond the object. This is called Socially Engaged Craft, and it's just a website that is newly created, and Jenny Hansen-Gard, another up-and-coming artist, is one of the contributors and contributors to this conglomeration of artists who are interested in creating a wide range of socially engaged art projects rooted in the history of craft, but expanding, and specifically expanding opportunities to do good in the community or to involve a community. And I really love this idea of an open resource, open sharing. The exhibition that's here at NCECA, across the table, across the land, has many examples of this idea of sharing and trying to build a community, trying to build culture. Jenny is inspired by Linda Arbuckle, who, like every single artist I talk to, is inspired by Linda Arbuckle. It's like all conversations lead to Linda Arbuckle. Jenny also did a Do Good residency at Red Lodge Clay, which was the brainchild of Jill Foote Hutton. And this short-term residency supports artists who wish to develop a body of work with a socially conscious spirit, a sense of community engagement, and the intent to do good. And I love this idea of trying to use objects in a way that promotes community. Jenny's done a series of dinner parties and even large, expansive projects where she's involved whole communities trying to get people together that would not normally come together in a certain place. And she's doing this by making really well-crafted, beautiful art forms, art objects that are functional, and but going beyond that to involve the community and to build a community, bringing together people. My next artist is Cheyenne Chapman Rudolph, again inspired by Linda Arbuckle, but also expands to be inspired by Julia Child, Lucille Ball, and Amy Sedaris. She uses these crazy, wonderful, sort of goofy in a way, improvs and interaction, and at the same time they are absurd and humorous. They are also very poignant and speak to really important issues of feminism and women in and trying to promote social change among women. This is her Pickle Pal, and she has an infomercial that goes with it. And along with her Kitchenvention, which kitsch is spelled the kitschy way, and this is a Frisky Whisk, and it's this interesting, like, part whisk, part vibrator. And so she's very, in one way, in your face, but in another way, she's very sort of cute and retro, and it's this just strange contrast that is so appealing in her work. But I love her use of, she's speaking about very important contemporary issues, but she's also using these very well-crafted objects in this way that sort of marries all these ideas together. This is her Lemonator, and again, this idea of questioning the roles of women in society and of women in their, and trying to figure out their power, their realms of power. And here's a close-up. You can see they're strangely sexual, but they're also humorous and fun. And I love her approach that she's making lemonade for you. It's a giving, it's very generous. She's not expecting something in return. And she very much doesn't try to elevate her art past what people can understand or grasp. It's art for the people. She's giving you lemonade. This piece is called Centerpiece, kind of the idea of centerpiece. But I love that she can challenge us and make us laugh and involve us in her community all at the same time using these wonderfully crafted objects. My next artist is Rose Simpson, who I think is just an absolute rock star. She is the daughter, she's raised on the Santa Clara Pueblo, and her mother is Roxanne Swensel, which many of you may know her figurative work, which also was very groundbreaking for its time in figurative versus traditional work. She's also inspired by Linda Sorman because she got her MFA at RISD. Rose is a really good example of a bridge in an attempt to, I think, a successful attempt to bridge culture between indigenous and traditional culture and the modern and new generation. She is incredibly able to work between and move between mediums. When I tried to make a list of all the things that Rose does, or the mediums that she works in, it took about a half of a page. She does sculpture, printmaking, drawing, creative writing, music, dance. She is a farmer working to preserve indigenous seeds on her, in her pueblo. She's a welder and owns an auto body shop. She does ceramics and fashion design and leather work. This is like among many other things. And in a very funny way, she actually supports herself by doing ceramic sculpture. It supports all of her other habits, which I found really fascinating. Usually it's the other way around, where we all have boring jobs to support our ceramic habits. She sees clay as a spiritual and a sacred relationship that she has with clay, although she very much chooses to use clay and works nimbly between all of these other materials. What you see up here on the screen is her vehicle, an El Camino, which she created in honor of Maria Martinez, who we saw earlier. This is her rendition of, or homage to Maria, a 1985 Chevy El Camino, which she created and customized by the artist. You can see the homage to the black on black pottery, and she actually drives this around as a performative piece in her community. And she does a series of performances and art pieces along with this vehicle, and she sees it as building this bridge between an indigenous traditional culture and the contemporary lowrider culture that's so prevalent on the Pueblo today, and an attempt to bridge or to bring reverence or importance to both cultures and try to bridge them together. I love her fluidity between mediums, and I love her comfort, her ability to move freely between lowrider culture and traditional culture, and how she's able to bridge both of them. Super fascinating to me. And also the fact, this is some of her fashions that she's done in leather working. And this is sort of a haul from her farm, these indigenous seeds that she's growing. She also raises goats and all these other wonderful things. So I love this idea of art and life merging together and all the things that are important. All right, my next artist is Roberta Masich, and she has many inspirations, but her focus is in the space beyond the object, light and shadow. She is inspired by a lot of architects who care for the space between. She's very innovative in the way that she shows her work, and innovative in the way that she approaches with multiple mediums. And again, these artists very savvy with using technology, Instagram. This is her work, and you can see the shadows and how the light plays, and how looking at the work and how she chooses to display it are such a significant part of her art. I love the way these artists don't fit into parameters, that they feel free to move in whatever medium is best for them. This is Linda Lopez. And again, jumping beyond the object and moving more into compositions, looking for innovative ways to work, moving beyond mediums. They are very comfortably using technology and platforms to share their work with the world. She sees Instagram as a curated feed and as just as significant as a gallery, an in-person gallery. So I'm sort of rushing here at the end because I really would like to leave time for your questions and comments. But in conclusion, I would just like to mention that there are so many people who inspire us, who are currently, right now, making history in what they're doing. Just being here at NCECA, I am overwhelmed by looking at the exhibitions and realizing that this is history. You are a part of making history right now in what you're doing and what's happening in contemporary ceramics. I challenge all of us to come up with our own lists. My dear friend and huge mentor, Gail Brown, sent me a fantastic list of her 50 people that she scribbled out. And I challenge all of you to think of 50 people who inspire you, and make that list, and you'll be amazed and overwhelmed at the generous spirit and the amazing things happening in contemporary ceramics today. But I just hope that we can all do that, generate our own lists and celebrate our own spheres of who is influencing us. And I'm going to turn the time back to.
Very nice.
Thank you. I want to thank our panel. It's been a great process, but before everybody leaves, anyone who was mentioned in this presentation, we hope you'll stand up for a minute so we can applaud you all. Please stand. There's many of you in the room.